Now, another new feature in version 6 is the new soft proofing panel located down in the bottom right of the display right here. Now, the subject of soft proofing is one that I do not engage in. Now, many of my workshop students ask about the soft proofing process, and I have to gently tell them it's a process that has very little value in my workflow. And you might ask why? Well, the main reason is confusion. And if you want to kind of look at it, let's take a look at this image of a sunset in Texas with lots of red, obviously. And let's look down here on the bottom right and examine some of the choices we have. And right now we're looking at it in the Adobe RGB color space, and we don't see any blown out portions. Now, what I want to do is change this. Okay, there's a lot of different selections that we can choose from here. So if we do that, I want you to also pay attention to the histogram in the upper left-hand corner and see the effect that it has on the histogram. Now, right now in the Adobe RGB color space, there are no colors that are blowing out. And if we change this to sRGB, we see that there are some colors that are blown out right here. Now, if we then go to the opposite direction, keep an eye on the histogram. If we look at ProPhoto RGB, we see that there is room to include many, many more colors in this image. And if we just, by way of demonstration, if we increase the vibrancy, watch what happens to the histogram. If we increase the vibrancy, the colors become much more vibrant, deeper, and more dramatic. If we keep going, we're still not clipping anything out. And if we drop down to saturation, we can do the same thing and come over and come over and come over and look at how dense and vibrant those colors are. Now, this is probably way oversaturated, but just by way of demonstration to show you what can be done, we'll show you, an extreme example. Now let's go back down here and change this ProPhoto. Now, this is where soft proofing comes into effect. Notice here I have the Moab Slickrock Pearl paper printed on the Canon Pro 2000 inkjet printer. Now watch what happens to the image when I click on this profile. You have almost half the image that's blown out, or in other words, out of gamut. And what this is telling you from a technical standpoint is that the colors that you see on the screen cannot be reproduced by this paper printer combination. And so you're pulling your hair out and you're saying, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I can't print this image on my printer paper combination. And that's where the confusion comes in, because when you soft proof something, you're not looking at it in its completely processed form. There's a lot more that has to be done. When you output from DxO into a 16-bit TIFF, these colors are all going to be brought into gamut by the perceptual intent, meaning that all of these out-of-gamut colors are going to be reorganized and given new mathematical values so that they will be represented in the paper printer output. Now, this all may be clear as mud to you at this point, but I guess the best thing is, if you don't want to get confused, don't worry about soft proofing, especially at this stage of the process, because this is the beginning of the process. What you output from DxO Photolab is going to need to be finished in either Photoshop or Lightroom or what have you. So when you look at this image the way it is, you're not going to output it in the paper printer combination profile. You're going to output it in ProPhoto, as we see right here. So if you do that, now we've got all those colors. And now when we assign the Moab printer paper ICC profile, it's going to be perfect. You're going to get a great result. So that's why I go back to the beginning. Always output in ProPhoto RGB if you want to avoid any weirdness with your colors when you print. Now, just for fun, let's look at some of the others. Let's see, Adobe RGB has some blown out areas down here. And we go to sRGB, which is going to have even more blown out areas because, as you know, sRGB is a smaller color space than Adobe RGB. Now, most Macs made since 2018, 2017 will display in the P3 color space, which is just slightly smaller than Adobe RGB. Let's go ahead and click on that. And in terms of the display, well, we're getting everything in there because obviously it is a display. I don't know what Rec 2020 is. Let's take a look at it. and it looks okay. I've never seen that used anywhere, but there it is. And we can also add profiles. In other words, I have all of these profiles on the Canon Pro 2000, and I have all these profiles with other papers and printer combinations, Ilford, Moab. There's some physiography, which is a black and white process, Red River, and then there's some esoteric profiles that are in here. So if you want to put in other profiles, you certainly can do that and take a look at, for what it's worth, you can take a look at how they affect your image. But I think most people are going to be grossly confused by this subject of soft proofing, and I've never known it to be a benefit in my workflow. It just gets in the way, it adds confusion, and certainly when you're just starting in this process, it just does nothing but confuse you. So the soft proofing function is here if you want to use it. Personally, I just don't let it get in the way of my processing.